The woman standing beside the fresh grave looked like she might blow away with the next gust of mountain wind that swept through Ukiah, California, in the summer of 1878. Xavier Whitmore had been tracking an elk through the pine forests when he spotted her from the ridge above the small cemetery. Her black dress stark against the dusty earth, her shoulders so rigid with held tension that even from this distance he could see the effort it took her to remain standing. He had not planned to come into town today, preferring his solitary existence in the high country, but something about the way she stood there alone, not a single soul beside her, made him change course and guide his horse down the mountain trail toward the cluster of buildings that made up this remote Northern California settlement. As he drew closer, Xavier could see she was younger than he first thought, perhaps 25 at most, with dark hair pulled severely back from a face pale as creek stones. She did not cry, did not move, just stared at that mound of earth like she could will it to give back whatever it had taken from her. The cemetery was empty except for her and the wind, and Xavier felt something uncomfortable lodge in his chest at the sight. He had lived alone in these mountains for 6 years now, avoiding human connection with the same determination that had once driven him to survive in the wilderness, but this was different somehow. This was wrong. He dismounted quietly, tying his horse to the cemetery fence before removing his worn hat and approaching with careful steps. She did not seem to hear him at first, so locked in her private anguish that the world beyond that grave might as well not exist. "Madam," he said softly, his voice rougher than he intended from days of disuse. She startled, her hand flying to her chest as she whirled to face him. Up close, Xavier could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the dark circles under green eyes that held more pain than anyone should carry alone. She was beautiful despite her grief, or perhaps because of it, something in the raw vulnerability of her expression catching him completely off guard. "I did not mean to frighten you," Xavier continued, staying a respectful distance back. He was acutely aware of how he must look to her, a mountain man with shoulders broad from years of swinging an axe and hauling game, his brown hair hanging past his collar, his clothes practical but worn. "I saw you standing here alone and thought perhaps you might need assistance." "I am fine, thank you." Her voice was hollow, automatic, the words of someone who had been saying them too often and no longer believed them herself. Xavier looked from her to the grave and back again. The headstone was simple, clearly new, the name carved into it reading Thomas Kendrick, beloved husband, 1849–1878. So young, Xavier thought. They had both been so young. "That is a heavy burden to carry by yourself," he said quietly. Something flickered in her eyes then, a crack in the careful composure she had maintained. Her throat worked as she swallowed, and for a moment Xavier thought she might speak, might let some of that grief out into the open air where it could dissipate rather than poisoning her from within. Instead, she turned back to the grave. "I have carried worse," she said finally. Xavier stood there, uncertain, feeling the pull to return to his mountains warring with something deeper, more insistent. He had spent years avoiding exactly this kind of connection, this kind of pain that came from caring about another human being. But he found himself unable to walk away. "Allow me to at least see you back to wherever you are staying," he offered. "The sun will be setting soon, and the walk from the cemetery is not safe in the dark. I live in town, the boarding house on Main Street." She still had not looked at him again, but Xavier heard the exhaustion bleeding through her words now, the bone-deep weariness of someone who had been strong for too long. "Then I will walk you there." This time she did turn, studying him with those green eyes that seemed to look right through all his carefully constructed walls. "Why?" You do not know me. I do not know you. My name is Xavier Whitmore. I live up in the mountains, trap and hunt for a living, bring my furs and meat to Ukiah twice a month to trade. He met her gaze steadily. And I know what it looks like when someone is carrying more than they should alone. Her lips parted slightly, and he saw the sheen of tears she had been holding back finally beginning to well up. She blinked them away fiercely, but her hands trembled where they clutched at her skirts. "Anna Kendrick," she whispered. "My name is Anna. Mrs. Kendrick." Xavier inclined his head respectfully. "Will you let me walk beside you?" For a long moment she said nothing, and Xavier thought she would refuse. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "Yes." They walked in silence at first, Xavier matching his long stride to her shorter steps, leading his horse behind them. The town of Ukiah spread out before them as they descended from the cemetery hill, a collection of wooden buildings and dirt streets that served the ranchers, miners, and loggers who worked in the surrounding mountains and valleys. It was growing, this town, people seeking their fortunes in the rich timber and mineral deposits of Northern California, but it still had that raw, unfinished quality of a place not quite sure what it would become. "How long has it been?" Xavier asked after they had walked a few minutes, unsure if he was overstepping but feeling the question needed asking. 3 weeks. Anna's voice was steadier now, though no less sad. "Logging accident up at the mill. A chain broke and the logs came down. He died instantly, they told me." "He did not suffer." Xavier heard what she did not say, the small mercy that was supposed to make it hurt less but never did. "And before that," she glanced at him sharply. "What do you mean? You said you had carried worse. I am wondering what worse looks like." Anna was quiet for so long Xavier thought she would not answer. They had reached the edge of town proper now, passing the first houses, the sound of people living their lives drifting out through open windows. Finally, she spoke. "We came out here 2 years ago from Ohio. Thomas wanted to make his fortune in the timber industry, said California was the land of opportunity." Her voice had taken on a flat, distant quality, as if she was recounting someone else's story. "We had a daughter, Sarah. She was 4 years old, with blonde curls and her father's laugh. She got sick last winter, fever that would not break. The doctor did what he could, but this far from any real city, medical supplies are limited. She died in my arms on Christmas Eve." Xavier felt the words like a physical blow, the kind of pain that made a man want to look away to pretend he had not heard. But he did not look away. He kept walking beside her, listening, his chest tight with shared sorrow. Thomas, he could not accept it. Threw himself into his work, stayed at the mill from dawn until long past dark. I think he was trying to outrun the grief, to exhaust himself so thoroughly he would not have to feel it. Anna's hands were twisted in her skirts now, knuckles white. "It did not work, of course. It never works. And now he is gone too, and I am the only one left to remember her, the only one left to carry it all." They had stopped walking without Xavier realizing it, standing in the middle of the street as the sun dipped toward the western mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Anna was not crying, but her whole body shook with the effort of holding back the storm inside her. "You should not have to carry it alone," Xavier said, and before he could think better of it, before the part of him that had learned to keep everyone at arm's length could protest, he was reaching out, offering his hand to her. Not touching, not presuming, just offering. "Let me help shoulder some of that weight." Anna stared at his outstretched hand like it was something she had forgotten existed. "Why would you do that? You are a stranger. My grief is not your burden. Maybe it does not have to be a burden at all if it is shared." Xavier kept his hand extended, patient, waiting. "I know something about loss, Mrs. Kendrick. I know how it can hollow you out until you are just walking around with nothing inside but echoes. And I know that the worst thing, the absolute worst thing, is having no one willing to stand beside you while you learn to live with it. Something broke in Anna then, some final defense crumbling under the weight of his words and his steady presence, and the simple fact that here was another human being willing to witness her pain without flinching from it. She reached out slowly, tentatively, and placed her hand in his. Xavier felt the contact like a jolt through his entire body, her fingers cold and trembling against his calloused palm. He closed his hand gently around hers, solid and warm, an anchor in whatever storm she was drowning in. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I do not know how to keep going when everything is gone. You do not have to know right now." Xavier gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "You just have to take the next step, and then the one after that, and I will walk beside you for every single one if you will allow it." Anna looked up at him then, really looked at him, and Xavier saw the moment something shifted in her expression. Not healing, not yet, but perhaps the first crack of light breaking through the darkness. She nodded once and they continued walking, her hand still clasped in his. By the time they reached the boarding house, full darkness had fallen over Ukiah. Anna withdrew her hand slowly as they climbed the steps to the porch, some of the rigid formality returning to her posture. But there was color in her cheeks now that had not been there before, and when she turned to face him, her eyes held something that might have been hope. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," she said formally, "for your kindness." "Xavier," he corrected gently, "and I meant what I said. About walking beside you. I do not understand. You live in the mountains, I live here. How could you possibly? I will come to town more often." The words were out before Xavier fully thought them through, but once said, he found he meant them absolutely. "Not just for trading, to check on you. To make sure you are eating, sleeping, managing. You do not have to do that. I know." Xavier met her eyes steadily. "I want to." Anna searched his face for a long moment, and whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she gave a small nod. "Then I suppose I will see you again, Xavier." "Day after tomorrow," he said. "I will come by in the afternoon, bring some fresh meat. You look like you have not been eating properly." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first Xavier had seen. "Is that your professional opinion as a mountain man?" "It is my professional opinion as someone who knows what grief looks like when it is eating someone alive." His voice was gentle but firm. "You have to take care of yourself, Anna, even when it feels impossible, especially then." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded again. "Day after tomorrow, then. Good night, Xavier." "Good night." Xavier waited until she had gone inside before mounting his horse and heading back toward the mountains. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like salt spilled on dark cloth. And as he rode, he found himself thinking about green eyes full of unshed tears, and the weight of a hand that had trusted him to help carry an impossible burden. He had not planned this. Had not planned any of it. For 6 years he had kept himself separate, isolated, nursing his own wounds in the silence of the high country. But something had shifted today, some fundamental change he could not quite name but felt in every part of his being. Anna Kendrick needed someone, and for reasons he did not fully understand, Xavier knew with absolute certainty that he was meant to be that someone. The mountains welcomed him back with their familiar embrace, but for the first time in years, Xavier found himself already counting the hours until he would return to civilization. True to his word, Xavier rode into Ukiah 2 days later with a deer haunch wrapped in cloth, and a nervous energy he had not felt since he was a young man courting his first sweetheart. He tied his horse outside the boarding house and stood for a moment, aware that what he was doing was unusual at best, possibly unwelcome at worst. Mountain men did not typically make social calls on recent widows in small towns, where gossip spread faster than wildfire. But he had made a promise, and Xavier Whitmore kept his promises. Anna answered his knock herself, and Xavier was relieved to see she looked slightly better than she had 2 days ago. Still pale, still exhausted, but there was more life in her eyes now. "You came," she said, and he heard the surprise in her voice. "I said I would." Xavier held up the wrapped meat. "Fresh venison, killed it this morning. I thought perhaps I could show you how to cook it mountain style if you have access to a kitchen. I have a small room here with a stove." Anna hesitated, then stepped back to let him in. "The landlady will have questions if she sees you. Let her ask them." Xavier stepped inside, having to duck slightly to clear the door frame. "I am not ashamed to be here, and you should not be either. Friends check on friends." Nothing scandalous about that. The word friends seemed to steady something in Anna. She led him through the boarding house to a small room at the back, simply furnished but clean, with a window overlooking the rear garden. It was clear she had been living here since her husband's death, her few possessions arranged with the careful precision of someone trying to maintain order in a life that had lost all structure. Xavier set the meat on the small table and began unwrapping it, aware of Anna watching him with an intensity that suggested she was grateful for something, anything, to focus on besides her grief. "The secret is in the preparation," he said, falling into the familiar rhythm of teaching. "Too many people try to cook game meat the same way they cook beef from the butcher. But deer is leaner, dries out if you are not careful. You need to cook it slow, keep it moist." He moved around the small kitchen with surprising grace for such a large man, his movements economical and precise. Anna watched in silence at first, then slowly began to help, following his quiet instructions. They worked together in a comfortable quiet, and Xavier found himself hyper-aware of every time their hands brushed, every shared glance, every small moment of connection. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Anna asked as the meat began to sizzle, filling the room with rich, savory smells that made Xavier's stomach remind him he had not eaten since dawn. "My mother, mostly. Then years of trial and error in the mountains." Xavier adjusted the heat on the stove. "When it is just you and the wilderness, you learn quick or you go hungry." "Why did you go up there? To the mountains, I mean, to be alone?" It was a fair question, and one Xavier had been half expecting. He was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share, then decided that if he was asking her to trust him with her grief, he owed her at least some truth in return. "I had a wife once," he said slowly. "Marie. We were married 3 years, happy as any couple could be. We lived in a small town in Colorado, and I worked as a blacksmith. Good, steady work." He paused, checking the meat, using the task to steady himself. "There was a raid, Comanche warriors angry about broken treaties and stolen land. Cannot say I blamed them for their anger, even though it cost me everything. Marie was killed along with 6 others. I survived because I was out of town delivering some metalwork to a ranch. By the time I got back, it was over." Anna had gone very still beside him, her hand pressed to her mouth. "I could not stay there after that," Xavier continued. "Could not look at the house we had been building together, could not face the pity in everyone's eyes. So I left. Wandered for a while, ended up in these mountains, and found I preferred the solitude to the company of people who reminded me of everything I had lost." "How long ago was this?" 6 years. Xavier met her eyes. 6 years I have been hiding up there, telling myself I was better off alone. And maybe I was for a time. Maybe I needed that. But when I saw you standing at that grave, I realized something." "What?" "That grief shared is grief diminished. That maybe the reason I have carried mine for so long is because I never let anyone help shoulder the weight. He turned to face her fully. "I do not want to make that same mistake again, and I do not want to watch you make it either." Anna's eyes were bright with tears, but she did not look away. "I barely know you, Xavier. This is madness, you showing up here, cooking in my kitchen, telling me your deepest pain like we are old friends." "I know." Xavier found himself taking a step closer. "But sometimes the best connections are the ones that make no logical sense. Sometimes you just meet someone and know, deep in your bones, that they are supposed to be in your life. And you think that about me. After one conversation in a cemetery, I do." He said it simply, with no embellishment, just the plain truth. "I think you came into my life for a reason, Anna Kendrick. And I think that reason is so we can help each other remember how to be human again." Anna stared at him for a long moment, and Xavier could see the war playing out behind her eyes, the desire to trust warring with the fear of more loss, more pain. Finally, she took a shaky breath. "I do not know if I can do this. Open up to someone again. Risk caring. You do not have to decide that right now." Xavier reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently touched her shoulder. "Right now, you just have to decide if you will share this meal with me. The rest can wait." Something in her expression softened, and she nodded. "I would like that. I would like that very much." They ate together at the small table, and Xavier was pleased to see Anna actually consume a decent portion, more than she probably had in days. They talked about small things, safe things, Xavier sharing stories about life in the mountains, Anna gradually opening up about her childhood in Ohio, the dreams she and Thomas had shared before tragedy reshaped their lives. As the afternoon wore into evening, Xavier found himself more reluctant to leave than he had expected. There was something about Anna's company that soothed parts of him he had forgotten were wounded, a gentleness and understanding that came from shared experience of loss. "I should go," he said finally, though he made no move to stand. "It will be full dark soon, and the mountain trails are treacherous without light. Will you come back?" Anna's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "If you want me to, I do." She met his eyes directly. "I know it is probably improper, and people will talk, but I find I do not care very much about that right now. You are the first person since Thomas died who has made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I might survive this after all." Xavier felt something warm unfurl in his chest, something that had been frozen for 6 long years. "Then I will be back. Day after tomorrow again. I can bring some supplies, help you with whatever needs doing around here." "You do not have to do that. I know." He stood, and Anna rose with him. "But I want to. Let me do this, Anna. Let me help." She nodded, and Xavier thought he saw the hint of a genuine smile this time. "Day after tomorrow, then." Xavier kept his word, and day after tomorrow turned into a pattern. He came to Ukiah twice a week at first, then 3 times, then 4, always bringing food or supplies, always finding something useful to do around the boarding house. Anna's landlady had indeed raised questions at first, but Xavier's obvious respectability and Anna's firm insistence that he was a friend helping her through difficult times eventually quelled the worst of the gossip. As summer deepened into autumn, the dynamic between them shifted and grew. Xavier taught Anna practical skills: how to gut and clean a fish, how to identify edible plants, how to shoot his rifle with enough accuracy to defend herself if needed. Anna, in turn, helped Xavier reconnect with the social graces he had let atrophy in his mountain solitude, reading to him from books borrowed from the small town library, teaching him to laugh again at silly things, reminding him that life held joy as well as sorrow. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, and Xavier found himself sharing parts of himself he had thought dead and buried. Anna did the same, and slowly, painfully, They both began to heal. Not forgetting their lost loved ones, never that, but learning to carry the memories with love rather than anguish. It was October, the aspens turning gold on the mountain slopes, when Xavier finally acknowledged to himself what had been growing between them for months. He was in love with Anna Kendrick. Completely, irrevocably in love with her strength and her vulnerability, her courage and her gentleness, the way she had let him into her life and her grief and somehow, in the process, had given him back his own life. The realization both thrilled and terrified him. It felt too soon, though it had been months since Thomas's death. It felt like a betrayal of Marie's memory, though he knew his late wife would have wanted him to find happiness again. It felt like tempting fate, opening himself up to the possibility of devastating loss once more. But when he was with Anna, none of those fears seemed to matter as much as the simple fact that she made him want to be brave enough to try. He found her one afternoon in the small garden behind the boarding house, tending to the last of the autumn vegetables. She looked up as he approached, her face lighting with genuine pleasure, and Xavier's heart clenched in his chest. "You are early," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. "I was not expecting you until this evening. I wanted to talk to you about something." Xavier removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "Something important." Anna's expression shifted to concern. "Is something wrong?" "No, at least I hope not." Xavier took a breath, steadying himself. "Anna, these past months with you have been the best I have had in 6 years. You have given me back something I thought I had lost forever, something I am not sure I have the words for. Hope, maybe. Purpose. The feeling that life is worth living for more than just getting through one day to the next." Anna had gone very still, her eyes wide. "Xavier, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you." The words came out rougher than he intended, but absolutely sincere. "I know it has not been a full year since Thomas died. I know people will say it is too soon, that it is not proper. But I cannot keep pretending what I feel is just friendship, not when every time I leave you, I count the hours until I can see you again. Not when the thought of a future without you in it feels impossible to bear." Anna's hand had risen to her chest, and Xavier could see she was breathing quickly, her cheeks flushed. "I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything right now." Xavier took a step closer, willing her to understand. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am not even asking you to make any decisions. I just needed you to know the truth, that I love you, that I want to build a life with you if you will have me. That I want to be the man standing beside you not just through grief, but through joy and ordinary days and everything else life brings. Xavier." His name was barely a whisper on her lips. "I am afraid." "I know, so am I." He reached out, cupping her face gently in his large, calloused hand. "Loving someone again after losing them is terrifying. But Anna, I would rather be terrified with you than safe and alone up in those mountains. You have taught me that." "I have been trying not to feel this," Anna said, and tears were sliding down her cheeks now. "I have been trying so hard to convince myself that what I felt for you was just gratitude, just the comfort of having someone understand. But Xavier, when you are not here, everything feels grayer, emptier. And when you walk through that door, it is like the sun coming out after weeks of rain." Hope flared bright in Xavier's chest. "Anna, are you saying, I am saying I love you too?" The words tumbled out of her in a rush, as if she had been holding them back too long. "I love your kindness and your strength and the way you have never tried to fix me, just stood beside me while I figured out how to fix myself. I love how gentle you are despite being so strong, how you see me, really see me, not just the grieving widow everyone else looks at with pity. I love you, Xavier Whitmore, and it terrifies me." Xavier felt like his heart might burst. Without thinking, without hesitating, he pulled Anna into his arms, holding her against his chest as she cried, though whether from fear or relief or joy he could not say. Probably all three. "We will figure this out together," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever comes, whatever anyone says, we will face it together. That is what love is it not? Carrying each other through the hard parts." Anna pulled back just enough to look up at him, and in her eyes Xavier saw his own feelings reflected back, that perfect storm of terror and hope and overwhelming rightness. "Together," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." Xavier bent his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but Anna rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deepening, months of connection and longing and shared pain transforming into something beautiful and new. Xavier felt like he was waking up after years of being only half alive, every sense heightened, every emotion amplified when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Anna laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Well, I suppose there is no hiding this now. Did you want to?" Xavier kept his arms around her, unwilling to let her go just yet. "No." Anna's smile was radiant. "I am done hiding, done pretending to be less than I am to make others comfortable. If people want to judge us for finding happiness after loss, let them. They have not walked in our shoes." "That is my brave girl." Xavier pressed a kiss to her forehead. "So what happens now? Now you ask me properly." Anna's eyes sparkled with something that looked remarkably like mischief. "I may be a modern woman in some ways, Xavier Whitmore, but I still want to be courted properly." Xavier laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "Is that so? Well then, Mrs. Kendrick, would you do me the great honor of allowing me to court you with the intention of marriage? I would be delighted, Mr. Whitmore." Anna's smile softened into something tender. "Though I think perhaps we should wait at least a few more months before making anything official. Give people time to adjust to the idea and give us time to be sure this is real." "It is real," Xavier said with absolute certainty, "but I will wait as long as you need." "I have waited 6 years to feel this way again. A few more months is nothing." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, and for the first time since Xavier had met her, Anna seemed truly at peace. They talked about the future, about possibilities, about the life they might build together. Xavier found himself describing his cabin in the mountains, the beauty of the high country, the satisfaction of living close to the land. Anna listened with growing interest, asking questions about what it would be like to live so remotely, so differently from the town life she had known. "Would you truly want to live up there?" Xavier asked, hardly daring to hope. "It is rough, Anna, beautiful but hard. Long winters, isolation, none of the comforts you are used to." "I want to live wherever you are," Anna said simply. And honestly, the idea of being away from pitying looks and whispered gossip sounds rather wonderful right now. "Besides, you can teach me. You have already taught me so much." "I could build additions to the cabin," Xavier said, his mind already racing with plans. "Make it more comfortable for you. There is a beautiful clearing that would be perfect for a garden, and the stream runs close by for water. We would not be completely cut off. I could still bring furs and meat to town. We would just be choosing when to be social rather than being forced into it." "It sounds perfect." Anna leaned her head against his shoulder. "It sounds like a fresh start, which is exactly what we both need." Over the following months, Xavier and Anna navigated their courtship with care and intentionality. Xavier continued to divide his time between the mountains and Ukiah. But now when he came to town, he and Anna spent their time not just as friends sharing grief, but as a couple building toward a future. They took walks through the town and surrounding countryside, attended church services together, and gradually, the people of Ukiah began to accept their relationship. There was gossip, of course. Some felt Anna was disrespecting Thomas's memory by moving on so quickly. Others questioned Xavier's intentions, whether a rough mountain man was truly suitable for a respectable widow. But the majority, seeing how Anna had regained her spark, how the color had returned to her cheeks and the light to her eyes, eventually came around to supporting the match. Xavier used the winter months to prepare his cabin for Anna's arrival. He added a bedroom, expanded the main living area, built sturdy furniture that would last. He chinked every gap in the walls to keep out the brutal mountain winds and installed a proper stove for cooking. It was hard work, made harder by the snow and cold, but Xavier attacked it with the determination of a man who finally had something worth working toward. In Ukiah, Anna prepared as well. She sold what few possessions she and Thomas had accumulated, keeping only the things that truly mattered. Her daughter's favorite doll, Thomas's pocket watch, a few books and photographs. She sewed practical clothes suitable for mountain life, quilts to keep them warm through long winters, curtains to brighten Xavier's cabin. She studied the books on wilderness survival and mountain living that Xavier brought her, determined to be a partner rather than a burden in their new life. They wrote letters when they were apart, Xavier's careful script becoming more confident with practice, Anna's words full of plans and dreams and increasing expressions of love. Reading those letters by firelight became Xavier's favorite part of each day, a connection that sustained him through the lonely nights. It was April of 1879, nearly a year after they had first met, when Xavier finally asked Anna to marry him officially. He did it at Thomas and Sarah's graves, wanting to honor the people Anna had loved before him, acknowledging that he was not trying to replace them, but rather to help Anna build a new chapter of her life. "I know you will always love them," Xavier said, on his knee in the spring grass. "And I would never ask you to forget or to put that love away. But I am asking you to let me love you too for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me, Anna?" Through tears, Anna said yes. They were married in late May, a simple ceremony in Ukiah's small church with a handful of friends as witnesses. Anna wore a dress of pale blue rather than traditional white, and Xavier wore new clothes purchased specifically for the occasion, though he still looked every inch the mountain man with his muscled frame and sun-weathered face. Anna thought he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. After the ceremony, they spent one night at the boarding house, consummating their marriage with a tenderness and passion that surprised them both. Xavier was endlessly gentle with Anna, attentive to her needs and comfort, and Anna found herself responding to him with a freedom she had never experienced before. They loved each other through the night, celebrating not just their physical union, but the emotional and spiritual connection they had forged through shared grief and healing. The next morning, they loaded Anna's belongings onto Xavier's sturdy horse and a pack mule he had purchased specifically for this purpose, and together they rode toward the mountains. Anna looked back once at Ukiah, at the cemetery on the hill where part of her heart would always rest, then turned her face toward the future. The ride to Xavier's cabin took most of the day, following narrow trails that wound up through forests of pine and fir, crossing crystal streams, climbing ever higher into the pristine wilderness. Anna drank it all in with wide eyes, the vast silence broken only by birdsong and the wind through the trees, the sense of space and freedom unlike anything she had known. "It is beautiful," she breathed as they paused at a ridge overlooking a valley of wildflowers. "Xavier, it is so beautiful I could cry." "Wait until you see the cabin," Xavier said, pride evident in his voice. "I think you will like what I have done with it." He was right. When they finally arrived at the clearing where Xavier's cabin stood, Anna gasped in delight. It was larger than she had imagined, the new additions blending seamlessly with the original structure. Flower boxes waited under the windows, ready for planting. A covered porch wrapped around two sides, perfect for sitting and watching the sunset. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney. "Did you come up here and light a fire before coming to get me?" Anna asked, charmed. "I may have ridden up yesterday afternoon," Xavier admitted. "I wanted everything perfect for when I brought you home." Home. The word settled into Anna's heart like a blessing. Xavier helped her down from the horse and, without warning, swept her up into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Anna laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck, marveling at the easy strength with which he held her. Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming. The furniture was rough but well made, cushions and quilts adding softness and color. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with pleasant scents. A pot of stew simmered over the fire, sending up savory steam. "You thought of everything," Anna said as Xavier set her down gently. "I had a lot of time to plan." Xavier removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking uncertain. "I know it is not fancy, not like what you might have had." Anna silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into it. When she pulled back, she cupped his face in her hands. "It is perfect. You are perfect, and I am so grateful for every moment that led us to each other." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Xavier taught Anna the skills she needed to thrive in the mountains: tracking and hunting, identifying plants and animals, reading weather signs and animal behavior. Anna proved an apt student, her grief-honed determination serving her well as she mastered new challenges. She brought her own skills to their partnership as well, keeping their home comfortable and organized, tending the garden that flourished in the mountain soil, managing their supplies and making plans for the future. They worked together during the long days, Xavier hunting or checking his trap lines while Anna tended the cabin and garden, both coming together in the evenings to share meals and conversation and the quiet comfort of each other's presence. They made love often, learning each other's bodies and desires with increasing confidence and joy, finding in physical intimacy another way to express the deep connection they shared. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of seasons. Summer gave way to autumn, painting the mountains in impossible colors. They harvested Anna's garden and hunted extensively, laying up stores for winter. When the first snows came, they were ready, snug in their cabin with months of supplies and, more importantly, each other. Winter was long and hard, but also beautiful in its own way. Trapped inside by blizzards, Xavier and Anna spent hours talking, reading aloud to each other, planning for spring. They learned every detail of each other's histories, dreams, fears. Xavier told Anna about his childhood in Missouri, his apprenticeship as a blacksmith, his early marriage to Marie and the dreams they had shared. Anna shared memories of her daughter Sarah, the little girl's laugh and curiosity and fierce hugs, finding that speaking of her to Xavier eased the ache rather than sharpening it. "Thank you for letting me talk about her," Anna said one snowy evening, curled against Xavier's side. "So many people after she died acted like mentioning her was wrong, like I should just forget and move on." "You will never forget her," Xavier said, his arm tightening around his wife. "And you should not have to. Sarah was part of you, part of your story." "I want to know all of you, Anna, including the parts that hurt. I wish you could have met her. She would have loved you, I think. She was never afraid of anyone, always running up to strangers and chattering away. She sounds wonderful." Xavier pressed a kiss to Anna's hair. "And I hope someday we might have children of our own, Not to replace her, never that, but to honor her memory by filling this cabin with love and life again. Anna tilted her face up to look at him. "You want children with you, more than anything." Xavier's expression was tender. "But only when you are ready. Only when the thought brings joy instead of pain." Anna was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I think I would like that. Not yet, but someday. The idea of little ones running around this cabin, learning the mountains from you, growing up strong and free. Yes, I would like that very much." Spring came eventually, as it always did, the snow melting to reveal fresh green growth and the return of wildlife from their winter hiding places. Xavier and Anna emerged from their cabin renewed, their bond deepened by the months of intimate proximity. They threw themselves into spring work with enthusiasm, Xavier hunting and trapping while Anna worked the garden and began adding chickens to their little homestead for eggs and meat. It was summer again, a full year since their wedding, when Anna realized she was pregnant. She told Xavier one evening after dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, processing the information. Then his face broke into the widest smile Anna had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably echoed across 3 valleys. He swept her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down gently, worried he might have hurt her or the baby. "Careful," Anna laughed, steadying herself against him. "I am not fragile, Xavier. You are carrying our child." Xavier's hands went to her still flat belly, wonder in his eyes. "Our child, Anna, I can hardly believe it. Are you happy?" Anna needed to hear him say it. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Xavier pulled her close, cradling her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I am grateful and terrified and more excited than I have been about anything in my entire life. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for giving me this." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer and into fall. Anna bloomed with it, her body growing round and her spirit lighter than it had been since before Sarah's death. Xavier was endlessly attentive, doing extra work to spare her any heavy lifting, bringing her special treats from the forest, talking to her belly when he thought she might be sleeping. They made plans for the birth, deciding they would go to Ukiah when Anna's time drew near so she could have the doctor present, but hoping that future births might happen here in their mountain home once they had more experience. Xavier made a cradle with his own hands, carving it from pine and smoothing every surface until it was satin soft, safe for delicate baby skin. "What do you want to name them?" Anna asked one evening, watching Xavier put the final touches on the cradle. "I have been thinking about that." Xavier set down his tools and came to sit beside her. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him Thomas after your first husband. He gave me you in a way, and I want to honor that." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Xavier, you do not have to do that. I want to. Thomas was part of your story, part of what made you who you are, and if it is a girl—" Xavier took Anna's hand, squeezing gently. "What about Sarah?" Anna broke down then, sobbing into Xavier's chest as he held her through the storm of emotion. It was too much, his generosity and understanding, the way he never asked her to hide or diminish the love she had carried for her first family. When she could finally speak, her voice was choked with feeling. "You are the best man I have ever known. How did I get so lucky as to find you?" "I am the lucky one," Xavier countered. "You gave me a reason to live again, Anna. You are my whole world." In January of 1880, during a brief warm spell between snowstorms, Anna went into labor. They had come to Ukiah a week earlier, staying at the boarding house where Anna had first lived as a widow, the strange circularity of it not lost on either of them. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through a day and night, Xavier at Anna's side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation in the first place. When their son finally arrived with the dawn, red-faced and squalling with healthy lungs, Xavier wept openly. Anna held the baby against her chest, exhausted but elated, and when she looked up at her husband, she saw her own joy reflected back at her. "Thomas," she said softly. "Thomas Xavier Whitmore. Welcome to the world, little one." They stayed in Ukiah for 2 weeks while Anna recovered her strength, then made the journey back to the cabin with their precious cargo. Anna had worried about managing a newborn in such isolation, but she found that the quiet of the mountains was perfect for those early, exhausting weeks. Thomas thrived, growing fat on Anna's milk and the clean mountain air, his cries a sound of life and hope echoing through the cabin where Xavier had spent so many years alone. Parenthood changed them both, as it always does. Xavier discovered depths of love and protectiveness he had not known existed, marveling at the tiny person who depended utterly on them for survival. Anna found that mothering Thomas, while sometimes painfully reminiscent of Sarah, was also healing in ways she had not expected. She was learning that the heart could hold multiple truths at once: grief for the child lost, joy for the child present, love for all of them coexisting without contradiction. Life settled into a new rhythm. The years passed, marked by the cycle of seasons and the milestones of their son's growth. Thomas took his first steps in the cabin, spoke his first words pointing at the mountains, grew into a sturdy little boy with his father's strength and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, Anna became pregnant again, and this time they decided to have the baby at home, with Xavier serving as midwife with the help of a book on birthing they had acquired during one of their town trips. Their daughter arrived on a spring morning as easy as Thomas's birth had been difficult, sliding into Xavier's waiting hands with barely a fuss. She had Anna's green eyes and a head of dark hair, and when Xavier placed her in Anna's arms, they both knew immediately what her name would be. "Sarah," Anna whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah Marie Whitmore, for both of them," Xavier said, his own eyes wet. All the love that came before, honored and remembered. They had one more child 2 years later, another boy they named William after Anna's father. Their cabin rang with children's laughter, with the sounds of a family growing and thriving in the wild beauty of the Northern California mountains. Xavier taught his children as Anna had once suggested, showing them how to read animal tracks, how to move quietly through the forest, how to respect and live in harmony with the wilderness. Anna taught them their letters and numbers, read to them from precious books, instilled in them kindness and courage, and the importance of standing beside those you loved through whatever life brought. The children grew up knowing about the siblings they would never meet. Sarah and her father Thomas, honored in family stories and gentle remembrance. Xavier made sure they understood that families came in many forms, that love did not diminish by being shared but rather multiplied, that the people they had lost were still part of them in important ways. Xavier and Anna aged together, their love deepening with each passing year. There were hard times, of course, illness and injury and the constant challenges of mountain living. But there was also joy, so much joy, in the life they had built from the ashes of their grief. They watched their children grow strong and capable, eventually leaving the mountain to make their own way in the world while always knowing they had a home to return to. On summer evenings, Xavier and Anna would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over the valleys and peaks they had come to know so intimately. They would hold hands like young lovers, though their hair had turned silver and their bodies had been marked by years of hard work and mountain weather. "Do you ever regret it?" Anna asked once on one of these evenings. "Giving up your solitude for me." Xavier turned to look at her, this woman who had saved his life as surely as he had helped save hers, and smiled. "Not for one single moment. You were worth coming down from the mountain for, Anna. You were worth everything. I was so lost when you found me." Anna leaned her head against his shoulder, so convinced that all I had ahead was more pain, more loss. And now I know that life is bigger than our grief. That we can carry our pain and our joy together, that one does not cancel out the other. You taught me that, Xavier. You shouldered half my grief and walked beside me until I was strong enough to carry it myself. She lifted her head to kiss him softly. "And then you kept walking beside me anyway, even when I no longer needed you to, because you wanted to." "Always," Xavier promised. "For whatever time we have left, Anna, I will always walk beside you." They kept that promise, staying together in their mountain home as the years turned into decades. Their children brought grandchildren to visit, filling the cabin once more with young voices and laughter. Xavier taught another generation to respect the mountains, while Anna shared stories and wisdom hard-won from her own journey through grief to joy. When Xavier finally passed away in his sleep at the age of 78, Anna grieved but did not break. She had learned too well the lessons they had taught each other, that love persisted beyond death, that carrying grief did not mean surrendering to it. She stayed in the cabin for another 5 years, tending the land they had shared, before her children finally convinced her to move down to Ukiah, where they could care for her more easily. Anna died at 83, surrounded by children and grandchildren, her last words a soft whisper of 2 names: Xavier, Sarah. Her family buried her in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Ukiah, next to the original grave where she had stood so alone all those years ago. Xavier was buried beside her, having been laid to rest there at Anna's request, because she wanted them all together, her past and her present, all the love she had carried unified in death as it had been in life. On the headstone between them, their children had carved a simple inscription that captured the essence of their story. They shouldered each other's burdens and walked together through grief into joy. The cabin in the mountains stood empty for a time, but eventually one of their grandchildren moved into it, continuing the legacy of strength and love and connection to the wilderness that Xavier and Anna had begun. The story of the mountain man who had seen a woman carrying her grief alone and had chosen to help her bear it, who had found his own healing in helping her heal, became part of family legend, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like. It was never about grand gestures or sweeping romance, though they had certainly loved each other with passion and depth. It was about the daily choice to stand beside another person, to see their pain and not turn away, to offer the simple gift of presence through both the hard times and the good. Xavier and Anna had taught their children and grandchildren that the truest measure of love was not how it made you feel in moments of happiness, but whether it gave you the strength to face sorrow without being destroyed by it. In the end, their story was one of hope, of 2 broken people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and had chosen to heal together rather than suffer alone. It was a testament to the resilience of the human heart, to the possibility of new beginnings even after devastating loss, and to the simple truth that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is just walk beside them, helping to carry their burdens until they are strong enough to stand tall on their own. And if, in the process, you find that they are doing the same for you, carrying your own unspoken grief, lightening your own hidden burdens, then you have found something rare and precious indeed. You have found partnership in its truest sense, love in its deepest form, and a companion for whatever path life takes you down. Xavier and Anna Whitmore had found all of that and more, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Not in monuments or great deeds, but in the simple, profound truth they had lived, that we are not meant to carry our grief alone, and that the greatest gift we can give another person is the willingness to shoulder half their burden and walk beside them through it.